My name is Juan Carlos Bagnell. I post all around the internet as at some gadget guy. I'm a tech reviewer, and I also comment a lot on tech politics issues like right to repair and net neutrality. And I do a lot of contract work for a number of other outlets, organizations like Slick Deals, trying to help consumers shop better deals for gadgets and electronics. Between Samsung and Apple, that's roughly 80% of the North American smartphone market. And now that they occupy that space, they've been increasing prices, removing features, making their products more difficult to repair. Both of those companies are responsible for initiatives that are severely harming the right to repair movement here in the United States. That's a bad direction for us to head. Is It's going to be harder for you to keep your phone running longer. It's going to be more cost effective for you to buy phones more frequently. It's sort of a planned obsolescence meets hyper consumerism, capitalism kind of situation. Motorola is now the number three smartphone producer in the United States. We kind of forget because Moto was like sort of the champion of Android when Android first hit the scene, but they don't spend nearly as much on marketing as Samsung does. So as a distant number three, they've got a portfolio of devices that are actually really interesting in the mid range. And then also their premium tier phones tend to not be as expensive as Samsung premium phones, but very feature competitive. OnePlus has been making some phenomenal devices over the last couple years. TCL, they're known for making big TVs, but they actually have a line of very affordable smartphones out on the market right now. And of course, Google. The Pixel A series is probably one of the absolute best bang for buck phones on the market today. And I would say it competes very closely, not exactly, but very close. And there are a number of things that the Pixel 6a I think can actually do better. I'm a big fan of those features, but I also sort of have to point people like we've gotten some new camera technologies out, and there's a new sensor used internationally. Sony has made this new camera sensor. It's a 1 inch type sensor, and it's larger than 16 millimeter film, and it fits in a phone that lives in your pocket. And the photo quality and the video quality is just astounding. And we've been in, especially in North America, we've been selling these camera gimmicks for so long that I think consumers have lost sight of what a real camera upgrade looks like. And this is a camera sensor that's now closing in on the performance of some of our entry level mirrorless cameras, and it fits in your pocket. So for the person who is into photo composition, they're wanting to be a content creator. They have an eye for what they're trying to shoot in photo and video. They're looking to edit those projects. These phones are incredible resources in being able to get that work done on the go. If your needs are a couple times a week, I pull my phone out of my pocket to take a fun photo of my kid in bright daylight, and I just need a snapshotty photo that's going to go up to Instagram, you're really overspending if you're spending more than Pixel 6a money. Like the Pixel 6a experience for that, I believe, is the most streamlined and most accessible. It's one of the best consumer point and shoot photography experiences you can find. It's just a benefit that that phone is only $400. It's not compromised for being a cheap phone. So that's what I mean is like when people assess their needs, they think in this one linear scale of worstest to bestest, and that's not how phones work. If you tell me you want a phone to get the office and document productivity done, I'm going to recommend a phone that has a stylus. I mean, that's really a huge aid for getting like spreadsheets organized and for writing down notes quickly. You're telling me that you'd like to not have to carry a ton of camera equipment, and that's how you get your work done. I'm going to point you to an expensive phone, but that expensive phone is going to have a radical new camera system on it that is very exciting to shoot with. If you tell me that the thing you most want to do on your phone is play games, we have some fantastic options for gaming phones that hyper specialize on graphics rendering and controlling the games, have extra shoulder buttons and triggers like that. We have a solution for that. I think where consumers get themselves into trouble is they think of phone as only being one thing. And we don't do that with other products. We don't do that with cars. We know that there are tiny economy cars and mid-size sedans and sports cars and trucks and super duty trucks and SUVs and minivans. You pick the right vehicle for your needs. We do the same thing with laptops. We have super skinny, ultra portable. We've got tablets. We've got flip and fold laptops. We've got monster big heavy workstations. We've got ruggedized specialty laptops that take more damage and more abuse. We need to do the same with phones. If you want to save money and get the perfect fit for your needs, then you've got to consider there are more types of smartphone than just Apple or Google, is that
Apple
there
is
are
not. Yeah.
specific purpose built devices for all of those needs. Right to repair is a movement that many of us techies feel requires government intervention to alter the business strategies of the biggest corporations that have top to bottom vertical control of their products. And so I feel that is a conflict of interest. I don't believe those two should be as controlled by one entity. So when you go into the Apple store and say, "Nah, we just can't fix this for you," um, a Canadian news outlet went in and said, like, "Oh, well, we took in this MacBook and we tried to get it repaired, and Apple said it couldn't be. And then we went to a repair store down the street, and for like $15, they resoldered some stuff and it worked like brand new again." Those types of behaviors are ultimately harmful to the consumer. And I'm not a big fan of Apple, but I'm upset on behalf of Apple consumers because the people who are hurt most by those business practices are the people who are most entrenched in Apple's ecosystem. So it's a significant push and pull. It's like I'm frustrated on behalf of people who don't think there's a problem. I'm frustrated on behalf of people who are happy with the Apple ecosystem and spend the most money with Apple. But unfortunately, it sets a business precedent that I think will eventually hurt the entire landscape for consumer electronics. And now Samsung has also started engaging in business practices because they see Apple doing similar things and it makes more money for the company to have you paying the most for repairs, for not having accessibility to parts, to not empower third party repair shops. It forces you to flip devices faster. Well, that's good for them. That is good for their business. And now it's too
Mhm.
late to say, "Oh, but all you need to do is vote and with your wallet and that's capitalism and the free market." Because right now the momentum is on the side of the two companies that occupy 80% of the North American smartphone market. You don't just convince millions of Americans, "Oh, by the way, just do business with someone else." So unfortunately, just kind of like where we were in the days of like classic AT&T and T and all the bells, like I think we are looking at the beginnings of a conversation where maybe we need tighter regulation on these massive corporations that they can't control every single aspect of every single part of the ownership strategy. Because unfortunately, I don't think consumers, a couple people deciding to not buy an iPhone doesn't change Apple's business strategy because it's too profitable for Apple to do business that way. Voting with your wallet as a handful of informed consumers doesn't change the global smartphone market. And what we need to do is make it very undesirable for corporations to engage in those kinds of business practices. If you're trying to save money, go to your carrier's website and look at some of those other options because there are a number of other phones in there beyond just the newest, most expensive iPhone and the newest, most expensive Galaxies. You might get a Galaxy A series. I have the Motorola. This is the Moto Edge, and there's an optional case that has a little stylus so that you can use it as like a note taking device. And it's got a pretty good camera on the back. It's got the ability to plug it in, and it creates a computer like desktop experience. This model has 512 gig of storage, which is four times more than the same priced Samsung. Or you could also flip that too. So start looking at some of those individual phones, set a budget for yourself. Say, "Hey, you know what? For my next phone upgrade, I don't need a more powerful device. I'm perfectly content with this tier of performance, but I need a refresh. I need a better battery. Maybe I want a better screen." And you say, "Hey, I don't want to spend more than $500." And go and see what phones are offered for $500 and then specifically look at what features those phones actually support. And if those features match up with your needs, you've saved yourself some cash. Likely, you can also get an even better deal on your carrier getting one of those mid-range. Yeah, I've got my Pixel 6a. $450 full MSRP. You go to Google Fi, you could get a significant savings on this phone. It was down to like $300 with like an agreement, kind of like a phone leasing strategy. So you could pay that up front, never have a phone bill, like a phone payment bill on your plan. It's that kind of thing that I think a lot of consumers need to spend a little bit more time. Right now, this industry exists solely on momentum. So the way that we used to do it is the way that we keep doing it, and that's how I just go and buy my phone whenever I need a new one. But if you make a little bit of effort, I mean, imagine how much that would help your monthly finances if you cut the monthly lease of your phone off of your bill, and you're not spending that 30 to 50 bucks a month, but you have a device that's really well fit to your needs. It wasn't a compromise. You actually ended up with something that was a better solution for what you need to do, and the icing on that cake is that you're spending less money to get there. My recommendations always start with the person's personality, right? So you really need to be honest with what features you actually use on your phone. And that's pretty easy to track. Look at what apps you've used, look at your camera roll. Do you take tons and tons and tons of photos, or do you just really only take a couple photos here and there? And from there, you want to try and just set a budget and really set a line in the sand. Like, I don't want to spend a penny over this dollar amount. And from there, I think you are so much better prepared to really look at the pros and cons of different devices. Because right now, I feel sort of the milk toast options are these sort of general all rounders that do everything well, but nothing specifically the best. And unfortunately, that's kind of where I feel the Galaxy S and the iPhone numbers have kind of fallen into. We're talking about $800 to $1,000 phones starting base model, the lowest price. And well, I guess, yeah, like around 800 to 1,000, somewhere in that ballpark. That is a lot of money to spend on a covering the basics kind of device. If you're really not using $800 worth of phone, then that's sort of a waste. It's like buying a really expensive sports car, but then you only drive it through school zones at 15 miles an hour, right? So that's where I always start. And from there, you can start looking at some of the different flavors of devices. Each brand has kind of a vibe. Like Motorola still tries to maintain a business vibe. They're kind of stark. Like, they're not exciting, fun phones, but they've got a lot of software baked into them to abbreviate interactions, like silly things. Like, I don't know if it'll work because I think the battery might be dying, but if I just knock the phone with two gestures, it turns on the flashlight and I can knock it right off again. But they've got apps in here that are built for helping you manage screenshots, make notes on things, alter documents, sign PDFs. That kind of stuff is phenomenal. And they also have stylus enabled phones for like $350 that aren't the most expensive super storage devices. For like, I was just holding it up now. Like, there are some really inexpensive options that still have like hardware keyboards. If you have
Ooh,
relatives that want like
love
the
those.
actual tactile keyboard, it's not the same as a BlackBerry. I have this fondness, this like soft spot in my heart for the old Blackberries,
Yeah.
but there are options for that. So they can still have some smart features, better apps. The camera's okay. They're really inexpensive phones, but the feature is they have a tactile keyboard, and maybe that's going to help them engage with messaging a bit more organically. Um, Things like software and support. I actually really like Google's strategy on this, where they don't offer as many full operating system updates, but they promise support for bug fixes and security patches for up to 5 years. So when you pick up a Pixel and it's a $400 phone, and Google is going to give you 5 years of security patches on that, you know that you're going to be in for reasonable protection. Samsung has offered longer support. I believe now the newest Galaxy A is good for around 4 years overall with operating system updates. But I feel that the pressure was put on Samsung because Google started selling more phones. Not because Samsung just was magnanimous and decided that this would be a nice thing to do for their users. Samsung will only change if they face competition and they start losing sales to other Android manufacturers. And so all these things kind of just go hand in hand in hand in hand. I feel like for iPhone owners, it's a much more difficult conversation because you have no competition. It's Apple. That's it. And so the iPhone SE is really long in the tooth. I don't think it's a great buy anymore. It's still technically an iPhone. What is it? It's an iPhone 6 shell. So how long ago was that? 7 years? It's a
Yep.
7-year-old phone. That's not a great buy in today's market. The better buys are really when you go a generation or two older, but the best bang for buck is kind of every other year. The iPhone 11 was a monster performer. The iPhone 12 was the first year with 5G, and the battery life on those iPhone 12s was not very good. The iPhone 13 became a much better buy because they added a bigger battery and they worked out some of those issues with the modems. And now we're seeing that the iPhone 14 as a high performance phone actually doesn't perform better than the iPhone 13 once it starts running warm. It's like every other year. I would expect that the iPhone 15
We'll
is
do
really
better.
going to be a nice upgrade. So if you can kind of get on the every other cycle for older iPhones, I think you're in much better shape. So for iPhone owners, you really don't get good deals until you start looking at like multiple year old devices. And even Apple's new refurbished sales strategy is really expensive. They don't hold their value like that. You can go buy a used phone on eBay or Swappa and you'll get a much better deal, but then you have to deal with, was this phone treated well? How much was it used? At what condition is the battery in? The refurb gives you a little peace of mind, but for hundreds of dollars more than what that phone might otherwise cost.